Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today. My name is Joe Sellepack. I'm the Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches. So, interfaith dialogue and interfaith understanding are very important to the Council of Churches as well as to our community in general. Democracy itself would not be capable of being performed if we did not have a great understanding of how various elements of our community can work together in order for us to be a community. So one of the things that I thought was very important a couple of weeks ago, we had a statement of on religious discrimination that a number of clergy in our area signed. 120 clergy signed onto in support of this statement. And I thought it would be important for us to be able to share this with our viewing audience as well as with the greater area today on Encounter. But let's start off by asking the question: why is interfaith dialogue and interfaith interaction important for our community?
Go ahead, Becky.
Interfaith dialogue brings us all together. It's a way that we can deepen our own faith by learning more about it and the interactions between us and other people, but it's also a way to build community. There is such a lack, it seems, of community these days. People, going home and watching TV or being in their phone or whatever, that interfaith dialogue has been a wonderful way to, help build bridges in our community and just learn a lot and not be afraid of things anymore.
And an interfaith statement like the one that we're going to read today is important for what reason? What do you think, Ehtisham?
So I think it resoundingly brought all of the faith leaders together and said, we all stand together against discrimination of any kind, against any religion. I think it was a very powerful statement. It was not just recognizing the rights of a minority, if you will, but it was more of a holistic standing against what we believe in, both as Americans and as members of Abrahamic faiths and other faiths that are in the southern tier.
And my guests today are Ehtisham Siddiqui and the Reverend Becky Kindig. Ehtisham is the president of IOST, the Islamic Organization of the Southern Tier, and Reverend Becky Kindig is associate at the United Presbyterian Church in Binghamton. Welcome to Encounter today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to, I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs of the Interfaith Statement on Religious Discrimination, and then we're going to talk a little bit about that. In light of recent calls for tracking, registering, or closing our borders to people who practice the Muslim faith, we are compelled as people of faith to speak out and let our voices be heard on behalf of our Muslim brothers and sisters. We have listened with dismay as many have played on the fears that have swept over this country. We reject in the strongest possible terms both this specific call and all speech and actions that would encourage hate and persecution against any group of people. We reject this call and remember that such an action would bring dishonor to all the brave men and women of all backgrounds who have given their lives to uphold the core values of freedom and dignity which we enjoy. So let's talk a little bit about that statement, just those first two paragraphs. So what recent calls are we reacting to in this statement, and why is it important for us to speak up about that?
Well, I think it emanated from some of the political landscape that we are all sharing these days, and some of these very outspoken politicians that are coming in. It started off with, we're going to build a wall, we're going to separate the Hispanics, and then it sort of veered after the Paris attacks onto, we're not going to allow any more Muslims to come in, and we're going to track all the Muslims, and we're going to track all the mosques in the country. And so that's what this whole declaration emanated from. So it was alarming to hear some of our very prominent leadership of the country say those kind of things.
And this has happened in our past, hasn't it?
Oh, yes.
And how has it ever been positive? The results ever been very positive, do you think?
To track
into...
No, all it is fear mongering.
Yeah.
You're setting a group of people up to be the other, and as human beings, we are very afraid of the other. And it was a survival thing when we were, on the savannah, and the lions were the other or whatever. But today, we should not be singling out people in any way, shape, or form, religious or any other way.
With Japanese
exactly.
folks in the concentration camps and pogroms, and you go through the history. It's all part of this statement, of course, but there's never really been a positive outcome from doing these things. So and then the other part of this statement that I find is interesting is the folks who've given their lives in service to our country. It's part of that second paragraph, and we know that Muslim people have served our country in the past through
and are serving.
Yes,
as a matter of fact, I looked this up a few weeks ago, and people that have officially declared their religion, there's about 5,000 of them in active service, and there are many more times that haven't declared themselves because you're not required to declare themselves. What is also important is that many of the Muslims have fought in Operation Iraqi Freedom and the subsequent wars. Some of them have died and have been recognized with awards. One in particular, Corporal Khan, who's buried in the Arlington Cemetery, was recognized with a Purple Heart. He was a young man, about 20 years old, died in the Iraqi Freedom Operation. So, and there's many more today. So, and if I could speak on behalf of the Jewish, there's many more times that have been there.
And Hindus and
yes, Sikhs
and Sikhs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of what makes America the melting pot that it is the idea that we all come from various ethnicities, various faith traditions, but we behave in a pluralistic kind of way, but we are all united as Americans.
Yes.
So, Becky, would you read the next two
Sure.
paragraphs?
We are appalled by the violence being done and hatred being spread in the name of the God who teaches us the value of human life, the prized place of peace, and the imperative to work for justice for all. These values lead us to condemn any and all acts of violence, especially those committed by people who claim a religious justification. We believe that words have meaning. We thus condemn words that lead to incitements to violence, defilement or vandalism of religious institutions, and all defamation directed towards other religious traditions. We likewise pledge not to tolerate such behavior in our own religious communities.
So, what does our faith have to say to violence? Who's capable of performing violent acts, and what does, and even more importantly, what does our faith tradition say about peace and the necessity for us being peacemakers?
As you might know, we're a part of the Children of Abraham group, which is part of who sponsored this statement. And we've had, the past several months, we've been doing once a month interreligious dialogue, interfaith classes. And we went over various topics and looked at our own text. So we would have in each day that we talked about a certain topic, violence was one of them, and peace was another day. We looked at Jewish, Christian, and Muslim texts about that. And all of the texts were overwhelmingly talking about peace and what prized place peace was in what they are teaching us. There are times that violence is unfortunately necessary. If people are trying to hurt us or our families, or our,
or
places,
persecuting you
or,
for your faith.
Exactly. Most of the text that said anything about violence was in response to that. We all had places in there that talked about violence and unnecessary things that we have all done. But the call overwhelmingly is for peace.
The common theme was the value of human life.
Correct.
And how it needs to be, protected. For instance, one of the things we read in the Quran, it says, whoever kills a person unjustly is as if he has killed the whole of mankind. So that's how significant it is. Same language in the Torah and the same language in the Bible. So universally, you would say life is very, very important. And when you talk about violence at the individual level, it is absolutely not allowed.
Right.
It's only when you as a nation, as a government, as a country are under threat because you're going to be persecuted for something, can you defend yourself against something. Now, in today's times, you may question some of the groups like you hear about the ISIL and Al-Qaeda who are taking violence to a different theme, if you will. I've been very categorically saying in my statements that there's nothing Islamic about what they're doing.
No.
Their acts are absolutely evil, and we denounce them in the strongest terms possible.
And but all the religious traditions have a sense in which there's a, even though they may word it differently, they still have the golden rule, right?
Yes.
Like whatever you do to me, or however you're going to treat somebody else is how you want to be treated.
Right.
Exactly.
Do unto others.
Right. So, in a way, it would seem to me that peace, you would want what's best for the other person then on that level, instead of it being seeing them as the other. You need to promote them. You need to say this is what makes for good, for their betterment, so that I can be treated in the same way. And that kind of is an interesting way of looking at it. It's not just the negative, don't do to people what you don't want them to do to you, but it's actually promoting their self-interest, saying, this is, I want what's best for them.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't see that in any of the other statements that come in. Most of it's very negative about the other. The other is viewed kind of through a narrow lens. Is that correct?
Which other statements are
well, like,
statements by politicians?